My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, and I am talking to you from the small town of Martin, Tennessee, where we've had an unusually warm Halloween. And even now, as I speak, the temperatures out there are around the mid-80s or so, which is fairly unusual for these parts around the early days of November. In any case, it's a good moment to talk about Frank Sinatra, because as we are slowly approaching the Christmas holidays, a new box set with live recordings made between the 50s and the 80s by Frank Sinatra in different parts of the world has been issued. It's called World on a String, and the recordings were made in places like Monaco and Italy and Australia and the Dominican Republic and Egypt, to name but a few. And it's a very interesting box set, I think. The concept is pretty interesting, since Sinatra was a singer who had worldwide appeal and did world tours and recorded in many parts of the world. I don't have a copy of that box set yet. I still haven't been able to get my hands on a copy of it. But this release has inspired me to bring out some of the Frank Sinatra box sets that I have in my collection and that I really like, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of those. Hopefully you'll find that interesting. Of course, when we're talking about Frank Sinatra, there are several really comprehensive box sets that include, for example, all the recordings he made for Columbia in the 1940s and early 50s. Also, there are box sets including all the concept albums that he made for Capitol in the 1950s and early 60s, and also box sets with the complete recordings that Sinatra made for his own Reprise records in the 1960s and later. I'm going to leave those aside because they are really comprehensive and good mostly for the dedicated Frank Sinatra fan like me, but might not be of interest to everyone out there. And I'm going to start this run through going back to the early years of Frank Sinatra's career. In 1939 he toured and recorded with Harry James, trumpeter Harry James, but in 1940 he moved up the ladder, quit the James Band, and became one of the featured vocalists with Tommy Dorsey and his orchestra. And this is the box set right here in my hands. The Song Is You. This box set includes all known studio recordings that Frank Sinatra and Tommy Dorsey made together. Here you can see them, Frank Sinatra singing and Tommy Dorsey playing the trombone. Sinatra and Dorsey had an association that lasted between 1940 and 1942, and during that time they made some fine recordings together. It was a time of apprenticeship for Frank Sinatra. He was honing his craft, so to speak, and on this box set we find some great recordings that he was able to make along the way. Songs like I'll Never Smile Again, for example, or The One I Love Belongs to Somebody Else, or Without a Song, or East of the Sun and West of the Moon, a lot of them featuring great sidemen like Babe Russin and Buddy Rich on drums and Joe Bushking on the piano. Also other singers like Connie Haynes and Joe Stafford and the Pied Pipers. Some classy music right here from the early 1940s. Some great jazzy big band music. And Frank Sinatra doing a fantastic job on vocals, but still starting out. He sounds really young. He doesn't sound like Frank Sinatra in the 1950s and 60s because he was still starting out, but there's some great music in this box set. The Song Is You, with fine liner notes as well by Will Friedwald, who is one of my favorite jazz critics, particularly when it comes to vocal jazz. There's 4 CDs worth of studio recordings here, along with a 5th CD of live radio broadcasts that also include Sinatra doing The Song Is You as he welcomes Dick Haymes into the band. And Dick Haymes was the vocalist that would take Sinatra's place with Tommy Dorsey, the same way that he had taken Sinatra's place with Harry James a few years before. Recordings from 1940 to 1942, The Song Is You. This is Frank Sinatra and Tommy Dorsey. Very recommendable box set that I listen to fairly often. Now, it's not always easy to find. It was released in the early 1990s, and so this other box set, which I have in my hand here, is called Complete Studio Recordings with Tommy Dorsey, and that's what it includes. It's only 4 CDs and not 5. It includes the complete studio recordings by Sinatra and Dorsey, along with some alternate takes and some film recordings as well. So it doesn't have the live recordings from radio broadcasts, but it's still a cheaper option and a pretty good option in my opinion as well. If you can't find The Song Is You, this is a good choice. Complete Studio Recordings with Tommy Dorsey, a fine Frank Sinatra box set as well. Now, Frank Sinatra in the 1940s and early 50s recorded for Columbia Records, and there's a massive, I believe, 12 CD box set that includes all the recordings that Sinatra made for Columbia Records. Now, after that, in the early 1950s, Frank Sinatra began his association with Capitol Records, and very importantly, his association with arranger Nelson Riddle. This is the time, the 1950s, when Frank Sinatra was recording his pioneering concept albums like In the Wee Small Hours, or Sinatra Sings for Only the Lonely, or No One Cares, or Close to You, and of course the swinging classics like Songs for Swinging Lovers or A Swinging Affair, many of them arranged by Nelson Riddle, but Sinatra also had some collaborations with other arrangers like Gordon Jenkins, for example, during that period, and with Billy May on Come Fly With Me. Sinatra was also trying to find hit records and record songs that would be appealing to the public, and not just recording concept albums. So this box set that I have here is called the Complete Capitol Singles Collection, and it includes on 4 CDs all the singles that Frank Sinatra recorded for Capitol. The songs are of varying quality, but there's some songs that might not be as interesting, like Not As a Stranger, or They Came to Cordura, or Frank Sinatra trying to sound like a rock and roller, 2 hearts, 2 kisses, make one love. That doesn't work as well, I don't think. But there's also some fine recordings here. Songs like, for example, Young at Heart, Don't Worry About Me, 3 Coins in the Fountain, and many others, Someone to Watch Over Me, and many others, which make this some interesting listening as well. Also, liner notes from Will Friedwald, very nice presentation, and some good music here from Frank Sinatra. The Complete Capitol Singles Collection. There's a duet with Bing Crosby. There's a few other duets, I believe a couple with Keely Smith. Definitely recommendable as well. Frank Sinatra, The Complete Capitol Singles Collection, which was released, I believe, around 1996. Now, the World on a String box set, in many ways, is a follow-up to a collection of 3 box sets that have been issued in the last few years, collecting live recordings that Frank Sinatra made in cities like Las Vegas, New York, and London. Now, one of them is this one right here. It's called Sinatra Vegas, and of course Frank Sinatra is synonymous with Vegas, and with the Vegas Strip, and with places like the Sands. And Sinatra would perform in Las Vegas very often, with and without the Rat Pack, and he was among the personalities who were responsible for Las Vegas becoming such an important touristic destination. When Sinatra was in town, you had to be there to see Frank Sinatra live in concert, with or without Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. Now, this box set here includes 4 discs, again, of live recordings from Las Vegas, some from Caesar's Palace, some from the Sands, between 1961 and 1987. So a pretty fairly big range of years there. And, of course, there is one concert with Count Basie and his orchestra from January and February of 1966. Some songs recorded around the time when Sinatra and Basie did that wonderful album that they recorded together called Sinatra at the Sands with Count Basie. The DVD here, there's 4 CDs and 1 DVD. The DVD was recorded at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas as well on May 1978. Pretty nice presentation as well, with a good booklet with pictures inside, fine sound, and really interesting previously unreleased live recordings by Frank Sinatra. This is Sinatra Vegas, another one that I listen to fairly often. As part of this trio of box sets that concentrate on recordings made in a specific city, we have New York as well. Frank Sinatra, also synonymous with New York. After all, he was from New Jersey and spent a lot of time in New York and made some good recordings, live and not live, studio recordings as well in the Big Apple. This is another good box set that I recommend. It goes back to 1955 for the first live recording, which it's fairly informal, and it includes Tommy Dorsey as well on trombone in February of 1955. So we get some live recordings from New York from the 50s, also from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Talking about 1955, 63, 74, and 84. 4 CDs and 1 DVD. The DVD was recorded at Carnegie Hall in June of 1980. Again, the sound is not as good, I don't think, in some cases as the sound on the Vegas box set, but I still think that it's an interesting box set to own, with some really good performances, some of which were recorded at Madison Square Garden around the time that Sinatra did his appearance there in the early 1970s for the album The Main Event, Sinatra The Main Event. Again, the presentation is fantastic. It does have a nice booklet with pictures inside, and again, even though the sound is not as good as the one on Las Vegas, this New York is also an interesting box set of Frank Sinatra live recordings on 4 CDs and 1 DVD. Now, the third of these box sets is this one I have in my hand here, Sinatra London. Now this is Sinatra overseas, going back to the 1960s, when he recorded an album that for a long time was not very well known. It had limited distribution, which is the album Frank Sinatra Sings Great Songs of Great Britain. This box set includes that album along with outtakes from those sessions, which were arranged by the great British arranger Robert Farnon. It includes some recordings from the BBC as well, and then disc 3 includes a concert from 1984 live at the Royal Albert Hall. In my opinion, one of the most interesting things of this Sinatra London is the fact that it also includes a DVD with a black and white concert from 1962 in a sextet setting at the Royal Festival Hall, and then another Royal Festival Hall appearance from 1970, which I believe had already been made available on DVD, but this also includes the 1962 performance from a world tour that Sinatra did in that year of 1962, with some really interesting recordings of Frank Sinatra in a jazzier setting, in a sextet setting. So for that alone, I think this is an interesting box set. Also, that album, Sings Great Songs of Great Britain, is one of the forgotten gems, in my opinion, of Sinatra's career. Sinatra London, this is also an interesting box set, although I would say that among the three, Las Vegas, London, and New York, the London one might be the least interesting of the three box sets. So if you are to purchase this one, maybe you want to wait and buy the other two first. And finally, I'd like to talk about a box set that was released last year, and that goes back to the very beginning of Sinatra's career between the 1930s and the 1950s. I'm talking about Frank Sinatra, A Voice on Air, going back to the year of 1935 up until 1955. And as you can imagine from the title of this box set, we are looking at Frank Sinatra live on the radio. And the radio was an important medium for Frank Sinatra, particularly as he was rising to stardom in the 1940s particularly. He was much fonder of radio than he was of the television. I know that in the 60s he made some fine TV shows, but before that, in the 1940s, Sinatra was a big radio star. And this box set that I have in my hand here captures Sinatra between 1935 and 1955 live on the radio with very good sound, and even going back to his first appearance on radio as part of the Hoboken Four in 1935 on the Major Bowes Amateur Hour, singing Shine, which was a big hit for Bing Crosby and the Mills Brothers. Well, this is really Sinatra prehistory, if you will, going back to 1935, but the rest of the recordings are extremely interesting with very good sound, and Frank Sinatra in some cases doing duets with different singers. We find duets with the Nat King Cole Trio, for example. That's an interesting thing right there, and also with people like other singers like Doris Day, Dorothy Kirsten, Jimmy Durante, even, and even Gary Crosby, Bing Crosby's son, appears here with Sinatra singing Sam's Song. Definitely not the first box set that one would buy to introduce him or herself to Sinatra, but it is an interesting album. Peggy Lee also appears here on some of these live recordings. Frank Sinatra, A Voice on Air, which captures Sinatra live on the radio and shows how important radio was for Sinatra's development as a singer and Sinatra's becoming a big star after leaving Tommy Dorsey in 1942 and going solo. A Voice on Air, going back to 1935 and up until 1955. Many songs on here are previously unreleased, and many of them Sinatra never got around to recording commercially, which makes this A Voice on Air even more interesting, if you will. And that's it. I think it's time to wrap it up now. I am really awaiting the chance to get my hands on a copy of World on a String, the excuse that I had today to talk about some of the most interesting box sets that Sinatra that have been issued over the years.